Welcome back, everybody, to the Big Sky Now Football Podcast. I am your host, Josh Amick, with my trusty panel, as always, Fritz Neighbor and Jon Allen. We are happy to be back. It's been a couple months since we have touched base with the fans and let you know what's going on in the Big Sky, but things are already starting to kick off in the season. We have a lot of topics to discuss. Fritz had his boots on the ground over the weekend for the Big Sky kickoff weekend in Spokane. Also, the preseason list just came out, so there is a lot to dive in. But we do want to let you know that we've enjoyed our time with you today. This is my last episode on the Big Sky Now. So thank you, everyone, who was part of this for the last year, especially Fritz and Jon, who have guided me through this whole process. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this episode. So stay with us on this journey. So Fritz, let's jump right into it. You were in Spokane about a week and a half ago for that Big Sky kickoff. Was there what was the energy like out there for the Big Sky, and what was going on, or that might have stood out to you, or something you might not have been aware of until you got to the event?
Well, I guess I wasn't too surprised by very much. There was one we'll get to later. A lot of energy. They brought 2 players from every team this year, so it was impossible to get to them all. So I kind of kept things. I didn't want to outkick my coverage, so I kind of went Montana centric. I do think, and maybe this shouldn't be a surprise, but I thought it was impressive that MSU once again I think will have a great offensive line. They're very confident about it, particularly head coach Brett Vigen is very confident about it. He said we plan to be better this year than we were last year, and I thought last year they were better than the year before, and that was really at the end of 2023, and they lost kids to graduation and transfers. I said, well, there's no way they'll be as good, and then they were every bit as good, if not better, probably better. And then kind of the same thing happened again, where 3 kids aged out, Perkins, Cole Sane, Marcus Ware, and another kid, Connor Moore, went down Michigan State, so they're in the same boat. And then you look at their 2 deep from last year, and 6 of those guys were underclassmen. So I think they're just reloading, and they're going to be everybody's good. And Vigen pretty much guaranteed it. Titan Fleischman's that preseason All Big Sky pick. He leads the way. JT Reed was in Spokane, was great to talk to. Still wearing his cowboy hat that he picked up in Frisco, Texas, ahead of the championship game, and fits him good. He looks the part. And other guys, Burke Mastel, Rollins, Jefferson, Everett Carr. Yeah, all those guys, they'll be back, and they'll probably get challenged by some other guys who are coming in. So that's the one thing that kind of stood out to me.
Jon, I know you weren't there, but was there anything over the weekend that may have been news to you that you wanted to discuss on the kickoff?
It kind of actually goes away from what happened in Spokane, but just over this last weekend, we've had some big discussions, and I know we kind of mentioned them before we started this podcast, but with Sacramento State, Caden Bennett finally found his transfer home. He's no longer with the Hornets. He's going to Delaware State and is going to, run it with Deshaun Jackson during his first year. So Delaware State's looking for their first conference title since 2007, I saw. So trying to do what Dion did with Jackson State and build them up. And that kind of just leaves open the quarterbacking battle now. Both the guys from last year are out of the way, and you've got, Cardell Williams and Jaden Rashada in at Sac State. So it's just going to be kind of interesting to see what goes on over there through this year. I know we'll talk a little bit about how the preseason kind of standings went and rankings from media and from coaches. So a little bit later on, but that'll be an interesting thing. And then just kind of on a local note here in Kalispell, with Sacramento State as well, Jackson Presley flipped his commitment from Montana State over to the Hornets there in 2026. So a year out from there, but he's looking to lead the Glacier Wolfpack again to their 3rd straight state championship appearance. So those are just some of the things that caught my attention over the past couple of weeks.
That's a good point. I'm glad that you brought up Presley, because that was something I did want to discuss, because we talked about him possibly going to Boise State, and then there was talks about him originally kind of going to school in Montana. Then he ends up in Sacramento State. So maybe he'll change his mind again before the end of his senior season. We don't know. But one of the things that we also haven't discussed since our last episode was kind of the conference realignment. There's been a lot of shifting going on. Now we have some more clarity than we did a few months back. Sacramento State is officially leaving in 2026. And then also joining the Big Sky Conference 2026 is going to be Southern Utah and Utah Tech. Do you think with these additions from the Big Sky going to now 11 teams and losing Sacramento State, Do you think this bodes well for the future of the Big Sky, or do these additions just kind of feel more like a filler for the time being, John?
I'm kind of interested with the Southern Utah coming back to the Big Sky. It was 2016 that they left, I want to say. But it's gonna they kind of burned their bridges on the way out. It felt like they were just dumping the Big Sky for bigger and better pastures with the WAC, and then the WAC project failed, and now they needed a home, and the Big Sky's clearly the best option out on the West Coast. You could try to do the Big West thing like Sac State's doing, and then you have to house your football team somewhere. But I think the Big Sky is kind of a good spot for both of them, because it adds a rivalry in. They're not too far away from Weber State as well, so you kind of get that trio of Utah teams. The one thing, honestly, that I would have liked to see is that I would have liked to see the Big Sky make a run for Utah Valley as well, as they were leaving the WAC. They're a non-football school, but it would have brought the conference level up to 12 in that regard. Could have given another team in the Salt Lake City area like Weber State is just on the other side, because they're down in Orem. So I wish that they would have gone for that, but I feel like it's a great addition for the conference.
I'm not sure it helps that much. Keeps the lower half of the Big Sky Conference, I guess, in the lower half. Southern Utah, certainly had its moments. It was in the Big Sky from 2012 to 2022, which John, you didn't realize that, and I kind of didn't either until I looked it up again today. And they won a couple Big Sky football titles in there in 2015 and 17. Incidentally, during a time when the Grizz were kind of fading a little bit under Bob Stitt, and I'm just not sure it makes the league any stronger, makes it bigger. We still have an unbalanced schedule, even though they're going to 9 league games, to the pleasure of almost no coach in the Big Sky. And I think it's worth noting that in 2015, their coach was Ed Lamb, and then he turned that into a job at BYU, and then he came back to Northern Colorado, and he's still there, but he's only won 1 game in 2 seasons. So maybe Southern Utah and Utah Tech will be better than Northern Colorado, but so far Utah Tech hasn't shown me much.
And John, one of the points you brought up that I really like is it's always not makes me uncomfortable or anything like that, but when a conference has an odd number of teams, it always kind of just makes me a little uneasy. Like, why is it not even? But that's just a personal reference, so I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, especially if I could hop in too, just maybe not in football, but with like basketball. When you set up a conference tournament, you kind of get the wonky first round with 3 games setting up, and you got 7 teams with a bye, and it just kind of gets all weird. 12 teams, it's nice and simple. You got 8 teams in the first round, 4 teams get a bye. Simple. So
yeah, we'll see how that works out. But you guys made a lot of good points. So moving on now to the preseason all-conference team. It was announced just last week with some notable names: Ty Pennington of NAU, Adam Jones of Montana State, Taco Dowler as well from Montana State, Eli Gilman from Montana, and then the Connors brothers down there in UC Davis. Are any of these names on this list kind of shocked by them making this list, or was there anything that surprised you, or somebody who may have been on this list or someone who was on this list that you thought may have deserved the nod, Fritz?
As I mentioned, as we talked before this podcast began, that was a challenging question to find somebody who should have been on the list and wasn't. It's a pretty exclusive group. They don't pick that many players, maybe 25 through offensive, defense, and special teams, 27. Liam Brown, maybe. He's been stalwart on the Grizz offensive line. We'll come back to you, Josh. You made a great point about Sac State, and maybe this is somewhat political. I'm not getting any preseason picks on the team, and coincidentally are leaving the Big Sky soon. Savion Red was a really good, pretty productive running back in Nevada last year, and he has a great name, and he's at Sac State. But I don't see how you move either Gilman or Adam Jones off that preseason list. And then you go through all the guys. I was like, Elijah Tautala, reads back, right? Nope. He went to Michigan State. And Drew Polidor for MSU, he left for Cal, and Damon Blankston at Weber State, he went to New Mexico with roughly half of Idaho's roster. It's 8, and that doesn't include that Idaho receiver I liked so much, hamper. He went to he went to two teams. He went to Wisconsin and then back to Cal. So there was just all that being said, I thought it was a pretty solid preseason team because they hit all the high points. Hit all the notes.
Before I get to you, John, I do want to kind of piggyback on the topic me and Fritz discussed when before the podcast recorded, that I thought it was a shock that Sacramento State was the top FCS team as far as transfers in, and then they don't have a single player land on the all-conference team. I did kind of take the same approach that Fritz did. I was like, is this political? Are they really like being petty because they are leaving the conference? Because there was a slew of talent coming into Sacramento State. We kind of mentioned Cardell Williams, John did earlier, and Jaden Rashada. I got to see him when I was at ASU. I just thought they had too much talent to not get a single player. Only team in the conference that didn't get it. You have Northern Colorado, who we all know struggles. They still had a player make it. So I just thought that was a little sketchy that no one on that whole roster made the list. But John, what are your thoughts on the preseason picks?
I wish I could add more to it, but it's kind of the same thing. Jaden Rashada was one of the ones that I had in there on my name, but just all those transfers coming in, you got to think that there's going to be somebody who's going to step up. But I guess, I'm not a big fan of preseason rankings or anything of that kind, because it's, you're taking guesses on who's making the biggest gains through the offseason, and it's before teams are even hitting it for fall camp. So it's a very difficult situation to put players or to pick a team that's going to go out there and do that for the season. So, I'm just not a big fan of it. But yeah, I feel like Sac State should have probably at least had one player in there, especially if you're going to pick them in the middle of the conference. Like you mentioned, Northern Colorado gets a team and they're at the bottom, and Fritz said they've won one game over the past 2 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just thought it was a little weird that they couldn't find at least one player who would make the list. But like you said, it is preseason list. They still have them in the top 6 to finish. So maybe they are giving them the respect. We'll see. But moving on to the preseason MVP mix, before we get to the defensive side, we'll stick on the offense this side. Adam Jones, kind of Fritz, I want to give credit to you. When I was working on the paper one day, you predicted it before it even happened. So props to you on that. And then you also predicted Rex Connors, I believe. Some other honorable mentions were Eli Gilman of Montana, Ty Pennington of NAU, Jared Taylor of Eastern Washington, and Idaho's Joshua Wood were some other nominations. John, do you think, as far as the preseason MVPs or the nominees, do you think that the committee got this right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely went into my head about Eli Gilman, but then I was thinking back on it and how he's played, and Coach Houck is very, he splits his running backs a lot, so he's not going to get the touches really that you would see in an offensive MVP. I mean, Adam Jones and Montana State can do the same thing, and injuries are always going to play a factor. I think Jones is a great pick. I mean, he showed out last year as freshman of the year. I like Ty Pennington as well. I like that he's in there as the honorable mentions that you brought up, and he's one that I think NAU this year is going to kind of take a step forward in their continuing their build up as they did last year and making the playoffs. So, and I think Pennington's going to be a big part of that.
Josh, you gave me too much credit. I predicted Pennington for offense.
You did. As soon as I said that, I was like, no, he didn't. I remember.
I did get Rex Connors right. And that was
You did.
That was an easy one. And, Pennington is the top quarterback returning in terms of passing efficiency, although there's not a lot of quarterbacks returning. But man, you can make a great case for Adam Jones. He should have been the Jerry Rice Award winner for top freshman in the FCS. And I think we all saw that 93-yarder against New Mexico in week 0 and thought, that's a dude. That guy can play. So he's a great choice. He's only going to be a sophomore, redshirt sophomore, but he set freshman records for rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. He's a good one. Good pick.
No, I agree for the most part with these picks. It's hard not to agree with Adam Jones. And I am very curious to see what Eli Gilman looks like as well. I'm going to circle back to Sacramento State here. I think maybe one of the reasons why they're so unsure about their preseason picks is because maybe they haven't completely settled in on who their quarterback's going to be, whether it is going to be Cardell Williams or Jaden Rashada. I'm a big believer in both of those guys, and I think Sac State has something to prove with all these transfers, new coach and everything. And also, they're still kind of in limbo with if they can get that independency that they want. So I think in order for them to do that, they have to have a really good year. So there's a lot of pressure on Sac State, but I think if I was to pick some guys who maybe are not getting the recognition, I think either Williams or Rashad or whoever gets that starting job, I think is going to do some things in Sacramento State. But I guess time will tell. Switching over to the defensive side of the list, Rex Connors, he got the nod for preseason defensive MVP. So other honorable mentions were Paul Brott from MSU, defensive lineman Tylen Jackson, and Idaho's Isaiah King, who was a linebacker. Anyone on this list of heavy hitters who you may have thought was a surprise, or someone who also you think may be an underdog pick?
As far as misses, I got a couple maybes, but as far as somebody that surprising to be on the list, no. But I came up with three guys who I thought will be reckoned with before the season's over. One is David Meyer, who's a linebacker at UC Davis, had a ton of tackles. And then I thought, this Montana safety, Jace Klusevich, he had 4 interceptions last year, and I think he's going to have an increased role. I just think he's a really nice player. He's one of those undersized safeties that seem to pop up for the Grizz and play bigger than they are. And then Zach Cruz, the Missoula Sentinel kid who wound up at MSU. I thought when he was in high school, I thought that kid's a Pac-12 talent. He was just an animal, just really tough at the defensive end position. And, he started out being at U of M, and then he wound up at MSU. And I think you saw glimpses of what he could do last season. And I think he will blossom this year and be a guy. I think it might be a first teamer.
I felt like Rex Connors was the, kind of slam dunk pick with the MVP decision, just because last season UC Davis, he really stood out for them and everything. And when you got to see them on the field, one thing that I really wanted to just kind of see is looking at the preseason list is Montana only having one defensive player, and defense is kind of the bread and butter for Montana when you think about it. And with Peyton Wing being the only player, a linebacker named to that all conference list on the defensive side. So who's going to step up for them this year? And somebody's going to have to do that. So I just was wondering, Klusevich, like you said, definitely one of those names that could pop in there. But yeah, it's just who's going to step up for them this year is one of the things that I was looking for.
Yeah, Fritz, I like how you bring up Klusevich, because the one game I got to check out the Grizz, he was kind of all over the field, and I believe he either had an interception or a fumble recovery that game, so he kind of stood out in the game that I got to see. One of my sleeper picks that I kind of had to dig deep for this one is Mason Rivera of Cal Poly. He's a defensive back. He finished with 81 tackles, 2 forced fumbles. I believe he had a sack and an interception. He made the second all-conference team last year as a freshman. This year, I think going into a sophomore year, I think he has a chance. And Cal Poly's not supposed to be towards the top of the conference, so that could lead to him being on the field a lot on defense and just kind of racking up stats. So maybe that was kind of my thinking. I think especially in the defensive back position, the more you learn, the better you get. So I think he has a really good opportunity to take a leap forward after the great freshman year he had. That was my one note for my little sleeper pick. But I do think it's hard to ignore what Connors did last year. Moving on now to more of the team aspect, the preseason coaches poll. I'm just going to read these in order so I don't get them wrong. No surprise at the top of the list, Montana State returning as the favorites, followed by UC Davis, the Grizz, NAU, Idaho, Sac State, they're at number 6, Idaho State, Weber, Eastern Washington, Portland, Cal Poly, and then no surprise really at the bottom, Northern Colorado. It seems like every year, though, there's usually a team in the NFL at least who goes from worst to first, or there's some teams who start out at the top and they don't finish that way. Are there any of those teams that stand out to you guys as potential guys that fall off or guys that potentially step up, John?
One of the things I think that Northern Arizona is going to step it up. I know they're 4th in that list, but I honestly feel like they could be a contender to take the conference championship, or at least a share of it this year. I kind of wrote this as like a bold prediction kind of, thoughts for it. I think that Northern Arizona is going to win 10 games this year. I think that they're going to beat the Cats in Flagstaff when Montana State has to go down there. And I think they're going to split the conference between those two. So, they've got a tough test right away with Arizona State. we'll see how that works for them and can kind of set up everything. But when you look at their conference schedule, UC Davis is definitely the toughest road game that they're going to have. They get to host Montana State. They don't play Montana this year, I believe. So the schedule kind of lines up for them to take that next step this year, and I think that they can definitely do it. Outside of them, Sacramento State being in the middle of the ground, we've kind of talked about them a lot this podcast. I think that they're going to definitely step up. I think they'll be a playoff team. I don't know how much of a playoff team, how good they'll be. I don't know if they'll be in the seeds, but I definitely think that they'll get 8 wins and make the playoffs.
I just think I think there's 4 pretty clear cut playoff contenders, and John had a NEU pretty good, and that's one of them. So I was thinking Davis and the Grizz and the Cats in NEU, and then Sac State. You mentioned unsettled at quarterback, but they've made a lot of hay the last 4 or 5 seasons playing 2 quarterbacks, so that doesn't bother me. But the dark horse I'm going to pick is Idaho State. I like their coach, Daddy Hawkins, as they call him over there in Pocatello. They start early. They play UNLV right away, so they're getting it going. They've got 4 quarterbacks that all played pretty well in their spring game. Jordan Cook and Davis Harson, Jackson Sharman, Logan Gonzalez. Their top running back, who was a converted linebacker, Dason Brooks, he's back. And then they picked up some speed. Baylor transfer, Jonah Burton, played really well in that spring game. I get a kid named Zion Nunnally, who's 6'4", who was a Wazoo Coug. So if we're looking for a dark horse, I'll go on a limb with the Idaho State Bengals to get their first playoff berth since 1983.
You guys made a lot of good points. You took away all the things I was going to discuss. My sleeper pick was also NAU. I think for one of the main reasons, as John alluded to, was the schedule. And then we talked about this at length or ad nauseum last year. It's just that home field advantage. I think if they can run the table at home, it puts them in a really good position to get to that 8-9 win mark. And I think that's good enough to make the playoffs. And also, it's hard to ignore when your quarterback is projected to be the top quarterback in the conference. Quarterbacks win games, so it was an easy pick for me to think that NAU could make some noise. And then I'm still on that Sacramento State hype train, thinking that they can make some noise. I think they have to. So it could either go really good for them or it could go really bad. I don't think there's no in between. I think if they go, 500 mark, that's not going to bode well for them trying to get their independency. So I think they have to play well. And obviously, with all those transfers, I think they're cooking something out there in Sacramento, and they believe in the coach. So I'm curious to see what happens with them. But you guys discussed that pretty well, so I won't say too much more. Moving on to the last topic of this podcast. It's always been my favorite topic, even though have not been great at them. We're going to talk about our picks. So we're going to start with you, Fritz, since you did win the board last season with your season picks. Give me your offensive and defensive MVP, and then also who do you think will win the conference?
Offensive MVP, I'll pick with my wrong pick back last week. I'll pick Pennington, the quarterback from NEU. Defense, I don't know, Rex Connors is just a great player, and I think Davis will be a playoff team, so I'll stick with him. And as far as the conference champion, I'll stick with the Bobcats.
John, you got anything different?
Not much. I've got Ty Pennington also as my offensive MVP. Rex Connors on the defensive side. And like I mentioned earlier, I think we're going to have a split. I think Montana State and NAU will share the conference championship. Okay.
Since I won't be here to see how these end up, I kind of went out on a limb with all these. So on the offensive side, I'm going with Eli Gilman. That's also just a nod of respect to both of you. But I think he's going to get more time as the lead back. I know Montana's still going to use a bunch of different backs, but the main reason why I think he can take it from Adam Jones is because I kind of trust Montana's passing offense more than Montana State's, especially with the loss of touchdown Tommy. So I think Gilman will rack up the touchdowns this year, and I think that'll be something that stands out. On the defensive side, I am going with Connors, but I'm going with his brother. And the main reason why is because he actually had more interceptions than his brother did last year. His brother is a defensive back. I think since Porter plays linebacker, he's just in more of a spot to make impact plays, whether it's forced fumbles or sacks. And with those interceptions, I think he has a really good opportunity And with Rex kind of being on everyone's radar, maybe they try to, like isolate that side of the field. And so his brother has a good chance to step up. And then my pick to take the conference is UC Davis. I think that game towards the end of the season against Montana State, where that game was back and forth, could have gone either way, and Montana State ended up getting the win. I think that bodes well for their confidence. I think they're returning a bunch of dogs on defense, and that'll play a huge part. And they have that playoff experience now. I think they've won a playoff game last year, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that bodes well for them. It's tough not to pick Montana State, but I feel like that's just too easy. So I decided to go with UC Davis, and then my sleeper picks, as I mentioned, NAU and Sac State. So we'll see what happens with them. But fellas, any final thoughts we got to give to the guests or to the fans out there before we wrap up this episode and someone else takes its place?
Well, we're going to miss you, Josh.
Yeah, I'm going to miss you guys too. It's been a fun ride.
It's been a great last year for this podcast. You and I joined it at the same time, so it's going to be different now, not having you here with us.
Yeah, I'll be around. Maybe every now and then I could pop in as a special guest and give you guys my terrible picks and see what happens with that.
Right. Go over to Wake Forest and say hi to Kennedy Moore for us.
Oh yeah, we'll do. Yeah, I'm excited to check out some college basketball. For those who don't know, I moved to North Carolina, so I'm kind of in the mecca of college basketball. So we'll see what happens with that. But I want to thank everyone who's been on this journey over the last year, especially Fritz and Jon, who guided me through this whole process fresh out of college. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and who's helped this podcast grow. We'll see you all in the next episode of the Big Sky Now Football Podcast. And until then, y'all take care.